Welcome to my preview of the Cheez-It Bowl featuring 9-3 Clemson versus 7-5 Iowa State. It's going to be Wednesday, December 29th at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Now, Clemson favored by 1.5 points in this one and given a 52.2% chance of winning. So close on both ends. This is a Clemson team to start off the season rocky. Having to replace Trevor Lawrence has a big ask for this program. So definitely not the year that they have seen over the last few seasons. Not a playoff team by any stretch of the imagination, but a program that has gotten better as the years gone on and finished the season strong. Now, Iowa State, opposite, starting off the season as a playoff potential team. They were talking into Iowa State might be a team that might be able to win the Big 12 and get to the playoffs. Started off the season a little bit rocky themselves, and they just haven't been able to really come out of that rocky road completely down the stretch here. Some close wins and some losses, some close and some blowout losses. So for Iowa State here, it's been a tough road. Clemson at a high point. It's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening in this one. Now, I'll say off the bat here, I am not a Clemson fan. I'm wearing orange, but it's Boise State orange. I'm not a Clemson fan. However, my wife is a Clemson fan. I got her this hat for Christmas, so there's my proof. So she is a Clemson fan, a big one, and I've sat with her and watched every single Clemson game. And like I said, I'm not a Clemson fan. They stole my best friend. He transferred out of Liberty and went to Clemson. So I'm not a Clemson fan. I've always held that against them, as it were. But it is a team that I've watched every single game and am familiar with. On the other hand, Iowa State here is a team. When I was growing up in Oklahoma, I was actually there the year that they were able to beat Oklahoma, get that upset win. That was huge. I was so excited. Or sorry, not Oklahoma, but Oklahoma State is the team they were able to get that upset win against. I was so excited for them to be able to get that win. And I've watched a lot of Iowa State football. I've watched a lot of Iowa State football this year. So these are two programs that, while they're not my school, they are two teams that I am familiar with. I'm excited to do this bowl preview. So series history, first ever matchup between these two teams. That is a trend in the bowl season this season. Record review for these programs. Now, like I said, I didn't expect, I knew it's a hard ask to replace Trevor Lawrence. I was not as big on DJ as a lot of other people were. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because pronunciation is not my strong point, even though I've heard it a bunch of times, but I'm pretty sure 90% of the time the announcers don't get his name right anyway. So I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, but DJ, everyone was going, yeah, he's going to be a Heisman contender. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks, in the ACC and in the nation. I didn't think that. I saw him play last season. Like I said, wife's Clemson fan, so I watched all his games. I was not impressed by his performance against Notre Dame or really in any of the other games that he was able to see action in. I really wasn't. I thought that the game went too fast for him. I thought that he made mistakes. I thought he was athletic. I thought he was good on the ground. Something that Dabo really didn't lean into was his running ability. And, of course, him getting that kind of being injured a little bit down the stretch there didn't help either. But he was a quarterback that I was not as high on. Despite that, however, Clemson was facing a very, very easy schedule. They really did end up facing an easy schedule. Of course, some of those ACC teams stepping up and being better programs than I thought that they were going to be, or other people thought they were going to be based on their performances the last few years. Wake Forest, North Carolina State, both those programs proving to be better overall than was expected of them. But overall, you're looking at this program that Georgia really is the only major game, a really tough game. The ACC definitely having a very much down year this season. I figured they were going to go 11-1. That was my prediction for Clemson in this one. I was actually close. I was actually less confident in them than Athlon Sports was. They were actually thinking 12-0. They thought they would beat Georgia, something I definitely was not predicting. But you look at his schedule here: South Carolina State, Georgia Tech, North Carolina State, Boston College, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Florida State, Louisville, Connecticut, Wake Forest, South Carolina. None of those teams jump out at you and go, man, that's going to be a really challenging matchup. I just figured that Dabo, the team he had built around him, he lost a lot of key players, but he's a great coach, and I figured he'd be able to get to that undefeated season, or at least that one-loss season with a loss to Georgia off the bat. However, it's not turned out that way. Clemson's offensive line has struggled this season. Their wide receivers have struggled this season. Don't get me started on their wide receivers. Don't get my wife started on their wide receivers. And their quarterback has definitely not played up to the preseason expectations for him. Iowa State, on the other hand, also a program that I had a lot of high hopes for, and that Athlon Sports had a lot of high hopes for as well. So I was projecting 11-1, 9-3 last year. But you look at that. I mean, they were, I believe it was less than 3 possessions away from an undefeated season last year. So, I mean, this is a team that was 9-3 last year, 7-6 year before that, but 9-3 last year. It really looked like this was a team that was starting to establish themselves as that team or one of those teams at the top of the Big 12 that was going to challenge Oklahoma, that was going to challenge Oklahoma State, that was going to beat, they've risen from a team that was not necessarily a basement dweller, but it was an upset team. When they beat you, it wasn't something you expected. They've risen from that level to being a top contender, and I really thought they were going to turn the corner this year. Just ended up not happening. Of course, finishing the season 7-5. How did these teams get there? Well, starting with Clemson, it was that loss there to Georgia, 10-3. Started off the season 4-3. Losses to NC State, lost to Pittsburgh. Of course, at the time that looks like a bad loss. Ends up not being such a bad loss. Pittsburgh wins the ACC. Where did we see that? I mean, nobody saw that coming. Ended up being a much better team than a lot of people were expecting. It was really the rise of the underdogs this year for the ACC. However, they finished off the year. I think this is important to note. They finished off the year 5-0. So they open up the season here 4-3, but they finish off the year 5-0, including a win against number 10 Wake Forest, a very good Wake Forest team with a great quarterback. Clemson's defense has been amazing this year. Their defense has been what they've hung their hat on, but the offense stepped up in that game, 48-27 victory. So the defense stayed strong. The offense was able to blow out Wake Forest. That really shows me that they have begun to turn a page here, and I really think it started with that Pitt loss. You really saw something kind of click for Clemson. They didn't get better right away, but they really started to turn the corner towards getting better. They started to use DJ more effectively, I think, and also across the board as far as the other guys stepping. I mean, Shipley's had a great year down the stretch here as well. So I think that you really kind of saw Clemson start to turn that corner in what was expected, I think, to be a rebuild year of sorts. Not the rebuild year fans thought it was going to be, so definitely much worse. But that rebuild has started to take effect, and as the season's gone on, this team at the end of the year is a way different team than the one that started the season 4-3. So top player, Iowa State. You can't move on right now. You got to talk about Iowa State here. So Iowa State, they started the season number 7, and they went from that to not ranked. So they started off the season 2-2, losses to Baylor, a win against University of University of Northern Iowa. Yeah, University of Northern Iowa only beat them by 6 points. And then they finish off the season here 5-3. So really, looking at a team that has struggled off the stretch and then continued to struggle as the year went on. Losses to Texas Tech, West Virginia. You don't want to lose to those teams. And Oklahoma. They only lost to all three of those programs by less than 7 points. I mean, so they were close to being able to get another great year. But it hasn't been the season that, when you talk about a team that starts off in the top 10, they should be able to beat those teams easily and not end up losing, even if it's by less than a touchdown. A loss is a loss when it's talking about teams of that low quality. Of course, Oklahoma, that's a good team, or maybe not the team that a lot of people thought they were at the beginning of the year. Spencer Rattler ends up not even finishing the year as quarterback for them. But, they only end up losing to Oklahoma, who's a good program, by 7 points. So there's a lot of potential here, but it's definitely not been the Iowa State that people thought it was going to be at the end of the year. And you're looking at a team that really honestly doesn't have any quality wins on their record. So top players for these two teams. So for me, it's going to be the running back here, Shipley. He has had, so it's not DJ. That's not my top. I think he's a player that is going to be important. His performance is going to impact how Clemson is able to win this game, if they're able to win this game. But my top player for the season, I think he is the MVP for this program, has been Will Shipley. 678 yards rushing, 5.2 yards per carry. He has 10 touchdowns. DJ has 9 touchdowns passing on the year. 10 touchdowns. Where's the offense come for Clemson? It's come through Shipley. He's had some breakout performances. He's been injured throughout the season. It's been 100%. He's only played in 9 games. But in 4 out of the 5 wins in that 5-game winning streak, he went for over 100 yards. So, 400 plus of the 678 he's had has come in the stretch down the season. And the discovery of a running game for Clemson, a reliable running game, like players stepping up and taking pressure off of DJ, has been the difference in this Clemson team. That's why they're a much better program here down the stretch than they were at the beginning. It's been Shipley for them. For Iowa State, I'm going to look to the wide receiver here in Xavier Hutchinson, 6'3", 210 pounds, so a big guy, 953 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. He's plus 200 yards greater than any of the second closest wide receiver on the team. He's the number 1 target for them. Brock Purdy here. He's not necessarily had the season that people expected him to have. He hasn't really proven it this year, but this target here for him, Xavier Hutchinson, has done big things. The referees haven't been kind to him at all this season. I mean, notably, had one of the worst calls ever was they called it wasn't taunting, but excessive celebration. He was crossing the goal line. I mean, I think he just kind of like did this, like this basically with his hands, like just barely anything, and got called on it. Got a touchdown the next pass. So he's been hurt by some refereeing calls for sure, which could maybe put a few more yards on him on this season. But he has definitely been the number one offensive threat here, at least in the receiving game for Iowa State, and the reason they've been able to get the wins that they have. So what is the keys for these two programs? For Clemson, I have it in all caps here, is catch the ball. You look at DJ here. So he's only out of the 392 yards. Sorry, out of the I'm not sure. I think it's a 9. Out of the 392 passing attempts, he's only completed 54.7% of them. But that's not because necessarily that they've been bad passes. Now, that has been a factor. That's been part of it. He has thrown some bad passes, and the offensive line or the issues with the offensive line have factored into that. But he has the main reason I think that he has his low completion percentage, and that's just from watching the games, is just the abominable drops. I mean, it's like the Clemson receivers have stone hands at times. I mean, I remember one point during the Syracuse game where they had a wide receiver wide. I mean, he catches this touchdown. He catches this pass. It's a touchdown. It's an easy, 30-yard completion. Catches it. Hits him right in the breadbasket. Drops it. I mean, that I have sat next to my wife just going crazy that Clemson cannot catch these balls that are, well-thrown balls a lot of the times by DJ. And I don't know if that's they're used to Trevor or they... I just don't understand how you go from a team that is so successful. You lose one key player, you lose some other guys as well. Of course, you lose your running back, you lose some other guys as well. But you change quarterbacks, and it's now a completely different team. And it's not necessarily just because of the quarterback play. I mean, the wide receivers have been a completely different unit this season. It's really been completely baffling that with the way that Clemson recruits and the way that they're able to bring team that they, based on the statistics as far as recruiting classes go, the fact that they've been able to bring in some better receivers into this program is really, I don't know if it falls on the coaching staff here or if it just falls on maybe these players just were having an off year. I'm not sure exactly what is showing, but Clemson has got to catch the ball. DJ cannot do it all by himself. He can, and especially right now, I'm not sure how that leg's treating him, if he's able to get back in and maybe use his legs a little bit more now with so much time off between the bowl and the end of the season and the bowl season. But Clemson has got to have receivers that can catch the ball if they're going to have success in this one against an Iowa State team. They're 7-5, but that is a good 7-5 Iowa State team that they're focusing. For Iowa State, they are missing their main offensive weapon. I didn't mention at the beginning of the video. I'm going to mention it now. They are without Breece Hall. He has decided to skip the bowl game. I'm completely opposed to that. I think it's disgusting. I think it's despicable. But he's decided to skip the bowl game. But he had accounted for 1,472 yards rushing and 20 touchdowns. One of the best running backs in the Big 12 for sure. So for my key here for Iowa State is that Purdy has to prove it. I already mentioned he hasn't really proven it this season, but he is without his number one running back. The focus is on him. He is the guy that's going to be able to get this win for Iowa State if they can get it. But it has to come through him. 2,984 yards passing, almost 3,000 yards passing on the year, 18 touchdowns, which is, I think, low for what he could have achieved. 7 interceptions. He hasn't had a bad year, but he hasn't been that explosive, consistent threat that you thought you were going to see out of him, or what the preseason expectations were for him coming into this year. So if Iowa State's going to win this game, he has to prove that he's the quarterback people thought he was at the beginning of the season. He has to prove that he is a quarterback that's going to be able to lead this team to a playoff win or to the playoffs, or put them in the position where they can go to the playoffs next season. He has to start proving that now. Bowl games for me are springboards into next year. I almost count them as like preseason matchups for the next season, in this case 2022. He has to prove that he can get this win for Iowa State. He has to. If Iowa State's going to get a win, it's going to be through him. So a prediction on this game. I don't think that Iowa State's going to be able to overcome the loss of their number one running back or be able to face off against a Clemson team that is rising. They are on an upward track. The momentum is gathering. Clemson's trying to prove that this was an offseason. It was a rebuild year. Even with it being a rebuild year, they were this close to going to the ACC championship game. I mean, they win basically one more matchup, so they beat NC State that puts them in a position there to then be able to go and win or go to the ACC championship game. So they were, even despite the fact that it was a rebuild year, despite the fact that DJ didn't necessarily prove to be the player that a lot of people thought that he could be, despite all those things, he still was able to go, or sorry, Clemson was still able to go out and put on a run late to get to a place that, for a lot of teams, that is the pinnacle of getting to that championship game. Clemson, even though we weren't in the playoff conversation, we're still in that conversation, and that is huge for this program. So this is a charging Clemson team that is steamrolling and powering into 2022, and I think 2022. I think we're going to see great things from them next year as well, as they can get the receivers in line. But I think that Clemson continues that uptick with a win over a spiraling Iowa State that hasn't really proven anything this season. I don't think that starts this game against Clemson. So that's my prediction. Clemson with the win and over on the over-under. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. I preview every single bowl game this season. I'm going through every single one. Make sure you find that link in the description to this video to my playlist for all the bowl game previews. Like I said again, make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching this video. As always, go Big Blue.